lives in the depths of our soul. Our intellect may be deceived, our feelings can be numbed and manipulated, or perceptions shamed and confused, or bodies tricked with medication, but our soul never forgets. And because we are one whole soul in one body, someday our bodies will present its bill. And some of you may be joining this program because your body is beginning to say, knock, knock, I am here to collect. I want freedom. I want to be liberated. I want to enjoy what you promised me when you accepted Christ. So, and praise God that our body does speak to us so that we can join seminars such as this. Miller continues, the wounded and lost child is only in hiding. Ultimately, our deepest self will accept no compromises or excuses, and it will not stop tormenting or contaminating us until we stop evading the truth, until we become aware that there's a truth beyond conversion, that conversion is the act of God in us, but it requires a partnership with him to awaken and become aware. So she also said, the wounded child is always attempting to complete him or herself and will not stop, even at the cost of sabotaging his or her adult relationships, until she or he receives or pays attention to the problem. So the reality is that we're here on this program because we heard or someone told us that there is something going on, even if they couldn't explain it, but their reaction tells us that something touched their early childhood and they shared. And so I'm delighted that you're here. And in order for us to get to the very bottom, we have to know our genograms. So we're going to hopefully do two things tonight. Learn how to create our genogram and look at some of the assumed roles that these family systems cause us to adopt, and then they trail with us, they follow us into our adult life. So a genogram, also known as a psychological family tree, is a graphic representation of the personalities and interplay of generations within a family, and it's used to identify repetitive patterns of behavior. You know, there's an old saying where people would say, my grandmother was an angry person, my mother was an angry person, and I'm an angry person. We have those kinds of sayings that really live out this whole issue that we need to learn and know about. And we can get there by doing our genogram. So Murray Bowen described genogram as a multi-generational passing and circuiting of anxiety. What he's saying is that if someone in the family had depression, it's likely that depression would have passed on to other members of the family, but in different ways. Friedman, in his book, Generation to Generation, he wrote, and I think I've shared this illustration with you, he wrote about a mother who had a baby. Did I tell you this one? And this baby was always crying, always appearing as if it was in pain, and the doctors couldn't find any reason. But when they studied the family history and looked at the genogram, they discovered that an aunt was living in the house and she had arthritis, and she would complain in the presence of the pregnant niece. She would complain about the pains in her fingers, pains in her. Now the baby couldn't articulate, but the baby was expressing what it heard all those days. So there is some reality to this multi-generational passing of issues. Please feel free to interrupt and ask questions. And actually, when you ask questions, you're not interrupting, you're helping me. So, okay. So to create your own genogram, it is recommended that you start with the third or fourth generation, because we want to follow as much as possible the biblical framework for this program, because I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm only a trained, I wouldn't even say trained, I was taught counseling and learned counseling through my own healing. So I want, and my healing was a biblical process using the wisdom of Murray Bowen and some others. So that's what I want to share with you. So in Exodus 24-6 and Numbers 14-18, it talks about how sin and other issues affect humanity to the third and fourth generation. So in order to understand your genogram, you have to decide what kind of family system you came out of. So there are several types of families, and I'm sure you know them. As soon as I begin to say them, you will know where I'm going with each one. Like the nuclear family, a structure in which the husband and wife live with their mostly biological children, and sometimes included in that biological family will be children that are adopted or children that are being cared for through some federal system. Then there's the blended or reconstituted family, a family structure created when divorced partners with children remarry. Now, this is a tough one. And I think, Michelle, this is the kind you address a few times. But the important thing to understand is that when it says this structure is created when divorced partners, it doesn't have to, divorce doesn't mean that there was a church wedding. People who are living together, common law family, can be divorced in that they split and separate and so on and so forth. So one can have a broader understanding of this family system. But it's a reconstituted family in that the children of the previous relationship. What is hard though, and I saw this in a church before I started in ministry. I joined a church when I returned to America from England. I joined a church where there was a family, and the mother had been married and she had a couple children and divorced, and then she married someone else and had one or two more children, and that marriage didn't last. And when I met her, she was on her third marriage and had a baby or two. So this doesn't have to be just two sets. It can be all of the marriages and the children included. What was difficult for the church members was not knowing how to, who was and how to, or let me say it was difficult for me. And it was especially difficult when the husband showed up with his new bride and children. She inherited the children of that marriage, and then he married somebody else who had children. Then they started having children. It was a mess. It was a strange situation. I didn't know how to handle it then because I didn't know all this stuff that I now know. And thank God it wasn't my responsibility to handle it. I was just a member of the church. But Sabbaths were very uncomfortable for many of us. Then there's the extended family, a family consisting of all relatives, parents, children, grandparents, aunts and uncles, cousins, etc., living under the same roof. Now, this is not as common as it used to be, because nowadays there are apartments for elderly folks, and there's nursing homes for elderly folks, and there are places for people who are terminally ill. So this is not a common family setting. Actually, I think you could search high and low and not find this kind of extended family in America anymore. And they're getting few and far between in other countries where this used to be the culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then there's a common law family, a family in which partners live together with or without children, but are not legally married. And even though they're not legally married, they're raising a family, so they become the significant others. So when I use the term significant others, I'm usually addressing families where the couples live together as married folks but are not married. Then there's the childless family. And I remember on one occasion when I spoke about the childless family years ago, someone asked me, how can you have a family without a child or children? But when two people get together, there's their parents that come in and fulfill roles that a child would naturally carry out. So a family in which partners are married but have no children. Then there's the single parent family. Now, this is the one that's common. You know, I clearly remember, and of course I'm decades old, I clearly remember when it was a shame to be pregnant and not be married. But nowadays, everybody's proud of their baby bumps. It's no shame. It's expected. This is how the world has changed so much. I remember when I was a little girl and they were just doing the research of going to the moon, and they would share ideas and discoveries and so forth. And I used to read about them and in comic books. And my grandmother used to say to me, don't talk about these things in public. They will think you're crazy. She lived to see the first man go to the moon. But in her generation, it was very strange to even talk about it. And now I'm living long enough to see the changes in the human experience to the point where we have AI doing all kinds of things And I find myself, like my grandmother, thinking, wow, this is too amazing for even thinking about it. But the single parent family, consisting of one parent, mother or father, and his or her child or children, is the most dominant one, so that we have terms like latchkey kids or those kinds of terms that indicate that the family system has changed significantly. And yet they still have roles that are either assigned or adopted. Then there's the transitional family, a family in which the mother or father temporarily leaves the workforce to look after the young child or children. So more and increasingly, with the age of men accepting their role and not ashamed of it, I remember when you would never find a man wearing a baby carrier in public. You know, one of those things that you strap on, and which was copied from Africa. I believe it was Nigeria. Studies were done, and they found that the Nigerian children were the most healthy emotionally and everything, because the mother carried the child on her bosom in a cloth that went around, that kept the baby close to her bosom. And that baby was raised feeling the heartbeat of the mother, just like it did in the womb. And that's how those baby things came about, where other nations started making, and some people got rich from making those things. But the problem was, studies have indicated that in America, they switched the placing of the baby. They carried the baby on their backs instead of on their bosom. And it's the heartbeat that made the baby healthy intellectually and emotionally. And so they lost the benefit. The babies did not get the benefit of being on the bosom of the person who was carrying them, where they could feel the rhythm of the heartbeat and so on and so forth. I can veer off very easily. I don't need to be tempted to go off on a track, and I'm not sure this is of any interest. But anyway, there's this transitional family among the various types of families. Then there's the dual income family. And these are listed in the American tax system, all these families. So you can claim any one of these families according to the tax rate that's assigned to the families. So a dual income family, a family in which both spouses work full-time, usually outside the home. Okay, Grace, yes, go ahead.
So I was waiting and hoping that once you got near the bottom, there would be a slide that said single family, just one person. So I guess I can't be a family if I'm just one.
Yes, because as long as you have family members that are supportive, so there are single families. I don't know why I didn't include that. I thought I did. Maybe I skipped over it.
You included it. Number 6, single parent
Yes.
family.
Yes, that's right.
No, that's not the same thing. A single
single,
parent. I'm talking about like just me. Like I am one person, so I consider myself my own family.
no, that there's no such thing in the tax laws, but as far as I know, because the word family means
More than one.
more than one. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So you can be a single parent family, but there's not a single family, a single person. Well, you're asking a single person family. Yeah, that's the whole words don't mix together.
I have a comment.
Yes, go ahead.
So recently, I heard about, I don't know if it's a new type of family, but it's called a relational family, where people just live together. They may be friends and they just come together and live together. No known type of relationship, family relationship, blood relationship, but like friends
Like
just get together.
Ella and myself, we would
Yeah,
be considered
relational
a
family.
relation. Yeah. Very interesting. I should look that up and add that slide to, yeah, because we do live as family. Yeah. Great. So in order for you to do your genogram, which is to map out what happened in that family system, you have to decide which family were you raised in, which one of these systems were you raised in, a dual income family, a transitional family, a single parent family, a childless family where there are two people, a common law family, an extended family, a blended family, a nuclear family. Which type of family were you raised in? Because now we're going to look at how to build your genogram. So these are some principles that Bowen pointed out. Families are systems of interconnected and interdependent individuals. And to understand the individual, we must understand the family system of that person, which is why one of these authors said, no one becomes addicted without a family, and no one can be healed without a family. The family has to be revisited to pinpoint exactly where the system went out of kilter that caused this person to believe that using drugs or sex or money or religion can make the system come back to order. People cannot be understood in isolation from one another. I think that's why there's not a single family, single person family. To help or heal those who seek help requires that the counselor inquire into their connections and disconnections. This includes understanding the transactional patterns of their family and behavior of the family members. And this is where the roles that you played in your family, and all of this is laying the foundation for you at a time when you have a time or so to do this. All of this is laying the foundation for your understanding and developing a genogram of your family's system. So note, there are other terms for the roles which affect emotionally or psychologically disturbed, such as narcissistic personality disorders, NPD, sexually, physically, rigidly dogmatic, spiritually abusive types of dysfunctional family systems. These are some of the main categories of dysfunctional, into which dysfunctional, especially severely dysfunctional families fall. It's not easy to determine who has been assigned what role in a dysfunctional family, as roles do change by necessity of someone leaving their assigned role by external factors which force a reallocation of the roles. What this means is that if in a family, a child is playing the role of a hero, but things change within the family and a hero is not needed, that child can assume the role of a rebel and throw the family into chaos, because now the family can't understand what changed, why this child that was so gifted and so brilliant is now so dull and unruly. So those are some of the things that can be detected by looking at the roles, the different roles. Furthermore, there may not be enough individuals in a family to assign a single role. Thus, multiple roles are bestowed on an individual member, but never at the same moment. And here's the thing about that. A person who's the only child can have played 5 different roles in the family. But what happens when they grow up? They look at the situations in which they find themselves and they adapt themselves to that role in that situation. And so people are generally confused. They don't know who you are on a certain day because the demands of those circumstances might require a change in the role, and they're already trained in the family systems to easily flip from one thing to the other. Each role has to be fulfilled one-dimensionally, which results in personal internal stress, as it's often far from clear which role the other family members demand at any given time. So if the family is going, the family system is rocky, and one person is playing the role of the caregiver, but then realizes that what's needed is a hero or heroine, it confuses the system. It doesn't cure or help the system. It creates confusion, and then there is more explosive reactions to it. Am I going too fast? Okay. This is just putting the tiles down on the floor, so that once you begin to develop your genogram, you will know. So these are some of the roles that children play in a family, and these were developed by Dr. Roberta Gilbert, who was a protege of Murray Bowen. So we're still in the Bowen family system. So there's the lost child, and the lost child is usually known as the quiet one or the dreamer. She or he is the invisible child who tries to escape the family situation by making themselves very small and quiet, by staying out of the way of problems alone a lot of the time. This child has come to the conclusion, if I'm quiet and I make no demands, and I become invisible by my quietness or silence, the relationship between the significant others who are the parents, the relationship will get better. The saddest story that I ever heard, and I've told this every time I've talked about the lost child, was the late Robin Williams, who was raised in a well-to-do family, but he thought that his parents were so busy that he would not make any demands on their time on anything. And so he spent his time, he told his story on one occasion when I heard his story, he spent his time locked away in his room, and he created his invisible friends. And those invisible friends actually made him very wealthy and popular, because he would, in many of his shows and comedy, sometimes where he seems like a mad person, he was simply adulting his childhood friends. He was simply, so he could talk funny to them, and that's how he learned all of that, and it later made him rich. But what he discovered was that the consequence of being alone and playing with his invisible friends was not enough fulfillment for him as he got older. He had an empty space he needed, and that space should have been filled by his parents, who would have been nurturing him through. And so to cover up that, he drank, and then he went to drugs, and eventually lost all ability to control anything. So being the lost child is maybe as a child, maybe a prevention to, or an attitude of a generous attitude of looking out for the family by not making any demands, not being outrageous or so forth that calls attention to that child. But it leaves a hole in the soul of that child as they grow older, because they're denying themselves, or are denied the very relationship that would make them whole, a whole person. But there's the lost child that in the family. So were you the lost child, that as you're thinking about your genogram? The purpose of having a lost child in the family is similar to that of the hero, because the lost child is really in trouble. Thus, the family can say, he's a good kid. Everything seems fine in her life, so things can't be too bad in the family. The lost child, however, seeks the privacy of his or her own company to be away from the family chaos. Because they don't interact, they never have a chance to develop important social and communication skills. This child avoids interactions with other family members and basically disappears. They become loners or are very shy, has poor communication skills, difficulties with intimacy and forming relationships. And if you happen to be this person, the hole in your soul is never filled. You can buy houses and cars and have lots of money. And we see some of the very well-to-do people, how they're constantly searching with all that they have and can do. They're never satisfied. That's because that hole needs to be filled with human interaction. The lost child, they deny that they have any feelings and don't bother getting upset. They deal with reality by withdrawing from it to establish strong bonds with imaginary friends. So in a narcissistic personality disorder family, the lost child just doesn't seem to matter to the narcissist. They are not perceived as a threat or a good source of supply, but are usually victims of neglect and emotional abuse. So she or he avoids interaction or conflict by keeping a low profile, even especially in adult relationships when they grow older. Yes, Grace.
So I know several people, I think, like that. I may have to evaluate myself even on that one. But especially those that are, like heavy into the video gaming and things like that. Is that something, maybe too, because everything you're describing, I see, in this person, and like you said, the poor social skills, the poor communication, all of that, just, withdrawing, all of that is very common, and they have taken solace in, like video games. And so I was wondering because, the gaming, you can, with the systems now, you can make friends all over the world through those,
yes,
quote unquote friends. You can make acquaintances rather,
yes.
but
yes.
you spend so much time alone, hours and hours every day, dealing with this. So I was just wondering if, that could be another means of the escape, is using like video games and things like that.
Yes. Using video games can be a symptom of an early childhood role in a family.
Mhm.
And so it's been so well performed that it becomes part of the essence of the person. And so they don't know how to get out of it, and they're not getting anything out of it, so they fill it with whatever makes them comfortable: drugs, isolation, all of these different kinds of things. Yeah, I think I saw someone.
Yeah, me. It's
Yeah,
me.
go ahead.
But then again, we have to be like careful how we put out those labels, because when we look at the generation today, Generation Z, they are all technological, all gaming, all these things. So just looking, we have to be very careful that when we see these things in others, we don't make a label of it, but
Yeah. But you're actually confirming knowing a label, because they are into all of these different things because they are not socialized.
Right.
So because socialization is part of the human animal structure, that we, animals keep their babies close to them and lick them regularly. It's not cleaning them. A lot of times we humans think like the mother cat is licking the kittens all the time. It's an act of socialization, communicating. You're not alone in the world. You're not a lost child. You're part of the family. And if the child selects that, when the child gets older, they'll have to find something to fill that empty space that's been created. So I see that in this generation, where parents are so busy making money to afford the lifestyle and the economic situation that's prevalent, that a child may very well have to play the role of the lost child in a family and not be demanding attention and complaining or getting sick or anything like that. But when they get older, they have to fill that with something. So they choose, instead of drugs, they choose technology, videos, or things like that. Yeah. Great. Good discussion. Observation. Yeah.
Sister
So-
Jeanette have her hands raised.
Yes. Okay. Go ahead, please.
Oh, that was from a while back.
Yeah.
When you were doing the different types of family,
Yes.
and I'm sure when you did this one wasn't, this kind of family wasn't as prevalent back there or so known. And it is the same sex family, like the
Yeah.
same sex marriage.
Yes.
And
Yes.
they're getting children. They're having children.
Yes.
So that's another type of family that.
Yes. That's right.
Mhm.
That,
Yeah.
that back then when Bowen was developing this, that didn't exist at all. But see,
No, sure.
times have changed. Yeah. And now we have same-sex families and they're raising children. Yeah. And they're even married. It's a different world, isn't it? Yeah. I often wonder, at what point does the child begin to sense that their family is different, and how do they handle that, and how does the family communicate that to them? It would be worth looking into some studies. Yeah. Another role that the family play, a child plays, and notice something, these roles are not played by the parents. These are the roles that are played by the children in the family in order to keep the parents together, not fighting, not cursing, not abusive, not any of those things. And the children assume these roles sometimes in a less dysfunctional family. They assume these roles and they can change as the family system needs it. But in a severely dysfunctional family, the roles are assigned. They're not assumed. They're assigned. And there's nothing that the child can do. The child has to do those roles, and when they're assigned a new role, they have to do that. So there can be a lot of emotional confusion. So the hero or heroine or star, also known as the golden child, this family member devotes his or her time and attention to making the family look normal, high achievers without problems. And I know this role very well, because even though my parents were not married, I was raised by my grandmother, and that was my family system. And the not growing up with a male person, a father figure. I had uncles who showed up at Christmas and Easter, but they didn't live in the home. So I didn't learn anything about men, how men think, how men behave, and all this kind of thing, because seeing them for one day at Christmas does not a family make. But I compensated for the lack of a proper family system by becoming the star. You know, I don't know if you've ever heard, if you've hung around me long enough, you know that I tell stories of when I was in kindergarten and Miss Janey would pick me to look after the children if she had to step out. You know, I have memories of of reading the newspaper to neighbors who came to our house on a Sunday, neighbors who couldn't read, and my grandmother had a get together with them on our veranda, and they would prop me up on a chair and I would read the newspaper at 3 years old. Some words I couldn't pronounce and didn't know, and almost all words I didn't know what they meant, but that's who I was. I have memories of being chosen by the Governor General or whoever it was to recite a poem when the Queen visited Jamaica. So this role I know very well. And if you just pause and look at my lifestyle and the choices that I've made, I still labor under this heroine concept. And I didn't understand, even now as I'm speaking, I'm beginning, clarity is coming as to why my son reacts to me in the way that he does, while I'm striving to get a PhD, which I don't need. I didn't need it. Why was I doing it? Just in me to be the star. So these things, even though I know God has gone a long way to heal me, I'm still identifying, and it's helping me to be less stressed out about accomplishing. And I almost killed myself. I had to wear a heart monitor for a few weeks, trying to keep up with this role that I was either forced into or made, because the family was, education is everything. You've got to have education. If you want to get out of poverty, the only way out is education, because they didn't have lotteries at that time, and not everybody wins a lottery. Yeah. Anyone else can perceive in themselves the role that they are? Maybe it's not a heroine or a star.
I definitely can see myself as a caregiver.
Yes.
Yeah. I used to take care of the neighbors. I used to cut their toenails. You know, if they're sick, I'm there to take care of them. And even today, I'm a chaplain at the hospital.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So you're seeing. Yes. Let me see if that's it.
Pastor
No.
Ivette, I would like to ask a question.
Yes. Go ahead, Michelle.
I'm trying to understand. Could you explain?
Yeah.
How can, in the different roles that the children play in the family,
Mm-hmm.
how to put it? How did the child become aware that something was missing in order to fulfill that role?
The child doesn't become aware. It's only when the child becomes an adult and they see that there are certain things missing in their lives that they start looking for things to fill. They can't even identify what it is that's missing.
What I meant was as the children are small in the home, and this child pick up the caregiving role and taking care of the family, and this one is alone or whatever. So how did they know, like, something's in them, that something's missing, that they know that somebody's supposed to take care of the children and this one fulfill that role? And
they do not.
How is that happening?
They do not know. Children are not aware of the roles they're playing. They just do what they're either told to do or expected to do. You know, there's an unwritten way of communicating that you're expected to look after everything, or sometimes you're even told that that's your responsibility, but the children don't. And it is not a problem for the children when they are children up to school age. But when you become an adult and you find that let me give you an example in this heroine. The Gilbert, whatever her name was, she suggests that people should be careful to marry someone who's a heroine or a star, because that person is incapable as an adult of intimacy. I'm not talking sexual intimacy, but sharing themselves. Because when she wrote, when you date them, they're the best person to date because they know how to make you feel good. You know, they bring you flowers and they talk a lot and they romance you and everything like that. But when you marry them, as soon as you marry them, it's silence because they don't know how to communicate without being the star, without performing. And it's too much in a day-to-day relationship for them. So you marry them and you find a totally different person that you're living with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so because all they know is how to shine.
Yeah.
But they don't know how to hold a person and talk them through discomfort and things. They have no idea. And the other thing is when they'll be silent one-on-one with their spouse, but when company comes over, the star comes
yeah,
out.
yeah, that is true. That's true. And then when the company go on, they're silent again.
They're silent again. And you find spouses of this one who consistently played that role in the family. You find spouses saying, they never talk to me. They have no concept of how to maintain intimacy and intimacy, according to Genesis chapter 1, chapter 2, the man and the woman were naked and not ashamed. And it's not talking about not having clothes on. It means that they had nothing hidden. The intimacy is having nothing hidden between two people who are married or in a relationship. You can make mistakes, you can fall apart, you can be the best, you can be the worst, but there is nothing that is embarrassing for you to say to that person. And the heroine or hero cannot do that in an intimate way. Yeah.
Dr. Harvett.
Yes.
My question is, sometimes you see people who have a list of the questions they want to ask when they're looking for a partner or something like that. So is it fair, like on that list, to put like something about trauma?
Ask that again.
So like when people are looking for a spouse or a mate or something, they have a list. I know people, and normally on that list, trauma is missing. Anything about trauma or, Yeah. So do you think that it would be fair to put that as one of the things on our list?
Yes, I think it's important to know, but trauma that happens in the early childhood development stages is not readily describable by the adult who experienced it. They can say something bad happened to me when I was a child, And it might seem like they're being secretive, but they don't have words, because children don't have words. They know they have the feelings, they
Yeah.
know they have the experience. So it's a difficult one to really pinpoint, because the adult that's experiencing that trauma, say for example, a trauma, one of the ways that may be possible to assess it is to see if that person, after some lengthy relationship with that person, you see that they're behaving like a 10-year-old.
Mm.
And that would indicate that they were traumatized at 10 and haven't grown beyond that, emotionally beyond that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's very hard to pinpoint, to detect. You can detect that something is wrong, but it's really hard. There are a couple of things. I'll come back to you, Grace. Is it on this point? Go ahead.
There's a question in the chat. I was just
Yeah.
gonna ask.
Yes, and I just opened the chat and saw that, and
Okay.
and let me see if and then it was indicated that there were two people with their hands raised, and I'll come back to you, so please just hold on, but let's read this question. Can one role be what you do and one role be who you are? For example, I believe I am a caregiver, scapegoat in my everyday life. It's what I do internally. I feel like I am a heroine, a scapegoat inside. Can I be three things? It's not that you are three things. It's that you are playing the role of according to the circumstances in which you find yourself, based on the circumstances where you were trained in the family to be that. So if you were trained in the family to be the scapegoat, you might be the hero on your job, but you have a group of friends and something goes wrong and you find yourself being the scapegoat. So what that says is that the family system, you were raised in confusion and emotionally. Remember that, maybe I didn't go over this, but the soul of the person in this therapy, the inner part of you is called the soul, the private self, the inner child, not the conforming public self, but the private self is where all of the years of every experience is bottled. And that private self is going to play out what it's comfortable with in a situation that mirrors what it had to use in the family system. Did I make sense with that?
Yeah, I think you answered my question.
Yeah, okay. So you're not being the role, you're doing the role that mirrors when you did that role in your family system. There were two hands. Go ahead. Wow. I'm going to finish up on this heroine, hero, star, because so that we can have a little bit of conversation after, because I can't believe it. It's already 8:11. Can you believe it? Where did the time go? So the hero, their goal in life is to achieve success. However, that has been defined, however, the success has been defined by the family. They must always be brave and strong. As a result, parents look to this child to prove that they are good parents and good people. The hero's compulsive drive to succeed may in turn lead to stress-related illnesses and compulsive overworking and overeating. They learn at a young age to suffer the sadness of a parent and become a surrogate spouse or confidant. We'll talk more about that when we address spousification. While the hero saves the family by being perfect and making it look good, such a golden child may struggle to live up to this status. In an NPD family, the golden child is the recipient of all the narcissistic parents' positive projections and is their favorite child. The golden child can and is usually victim of emotional and covert sexual abuse by the narcissistic parent. We'll talk more about that. She or he is also witness to and sometimes takes part in the other children's abuse. Many specialists believe that witnessing a sibling's abuse is as damaging as receiving it. So let's talk. What did you hear that confused you that would be helpful to discuss?
I'll go. So it sounds like these roles are being facilitated when the person grows up. Is that what you're saying?
These roles are, I'm not sure what the word facilitated means, how you're using it.
So when you answered one question, you were saying the person is just being in the role.
Yes, because the adult person,
Mm-hmm.
their private self is now so confused that it's not being a lost child. It's doing the role of a lost child in a situation that mirrors what it did in the family system. But the lost child, but the private self doesn't know who she or he is.
I got it. Thank you.
Yeah. So that's why work has to be done to give that person an identity. I think sometimes in suicide, there may be a problem that push the person over the edge to kill themselves, but hardly anybody kills themselves when they know who they are. It's the person who has no identity. And if you read suicide notes, the big cry behind that which, they can say, it's because someone did this to me. But if you know who you are, identity is such a powerful thing that when people are kidnapped, the first thing they try to do is to erase the identity of the person, not the public identity that the paper says the child was 9 years old and pretty blonde or, dark skinned or something. That's not identity. Is who you are inside. You know that you're existing as a human being. Yeah. And I think the issue is that we're somehow in school and or religion, we're not taught this existence of the private self and its development and the public conforming self. It's only when we become adults and we're breaking down that we find a psychologist or psychiatrist or counselor and we learn these things. But I believe if we were taught early on, how God created us with these two selves, the private self and the public self, and how he intended, the Jews got it. They know. That's why they celebrate the integration when the child is 11, 12 in that age group, because they understand that this is not an aberration. This is how God created us to be, so that we would grow together and be integrated, and then we would be able to flourish, and as believers we would be able to enjoy the abundant life that Jesus talks about. Satan has done a big deal thing to us, that while we're worrying whether or not somebody wears nail polish, I just saw my nails flash up in front of me. While in church, we're worrying about whether or not somebody wears nail polish or whatever. We're missing the point of the damage that God corrects through conversion. Anyway, you can see that I'm passionate about it. Talk back to me.
I had a good laugh with that, Pastor, because I know for a fact that is what happens. And I said we're missing the point, because while we focus on these are trivial matters, it doesn't matter. Is God going to keep out of the kingdom because you have nail polish?
Yeah.
But I would like to so the self that you're talking about, on another note, because we have two selves, the private self and the
it's self, SELF, not selves. Selves is what
public self, private self.
Yes.
So and is it that one of the self supposed to be more dominant than the other, or
no? When God created us humans, they both were equal and they were supposed to grow together. But when trauma happens, the private self, where our emotions are stored, can be paralyzed, can stop growing. So say that you were in an accident when you were 5 years old, and there was a lot of damage and blood and so on and so forth. For a 5-year-old, that can be traumatic. It's possible that you stop growing emotionally at 5. Then when you're 50 years old, you discover that you feel like you've never been loved. You look back and you can't sense and feel the sense of belonging or anything like that. And then you realize that something is amiss, something's missing in your life. You have to go to a therapist, and if the therapist is a good therapist, they will point out to you, this is what Bowen or any of the people who do Friedman, or any of the many names who do family systems can tell you, that what's happened is that your private self has been traumatized and has not grown. So you can't deal emotionally mature when your public self is mature and can do anything, but it can only do what the private self tells it. So you have a 5-year-old private self, and what do 5-year-old children do? They fight. They don't know how to relate. And that's so you as the 50-year-old is behaving like a 5-year-old emotionally. And the awful thing is that we always seek to develop ourselves or private self by picking someone that has a similar need, which doesn't make sense. We
But
pick
we're not
friends.
aware of doing that. We're not aware that we are picking the person with a similar need.
Yes.
Oh,
But
Okay.
we pick that person because we know the language.
okay. Yeah.
I just want to ask something as we're in this
Yes.
the business and needing to know who you are, etc. As I'm looking around, when I was growing up, these things happen, but looking around in society today, I see so many children who don't know who they are.
Yeah.
It is just, and the moms, they're saying, well, this is a girl, but this one wants to be a boy and it's okay.
Yes.
And
Yes.
like there is lost identity like I have not seen before.
Yes.
And I don't know what's happening.
That's because Satan is ruling.
Oh,
This is Satan's world, and he's ruling. And even people who say they love Jesus are following his rulership.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we're robbing the little children of their real identity. They know about their sexual orientation, but they have no idea about their creator and how they were created.
Yes. Because I remember when we were growing up at school, us girls, we'd hold each other's hands, we laugh, we play, we hug each other, we do all these things. Now, if the kids do that, somebody said, well, maybe you're not a girl, maybe you like girls, all these. Yeah, it is the devil, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Boy.
And the worst thing is that the devil has the politicians in their pockets.
Mm-hmm. So sad.
And they're setting the tone one way or the other.
Yeah.
And so people have these children are growing up because what's our number one identity is that we're not things. We are created beings in the image of God.
God, yes.
But even in the church, you ask a child, they don't know because the parents don't know. And we're following the rules of the kingdom of darkness. And I think it's important for us to share with adults so that adults can impart it to children.
Pastor, my question is,
Yes.
would the hero be the same person that we call like the fixer in the family?
Sometimes, well, let me answer correctly. No, because the hero is not concerned about anything or anyone else but themselves.
Okay.
Yeah. So the fixer would be the caregiver or the codependent person who sees more the needs of others more than they see for themselves. So the fixer is the one that's always straightening out your dress and making sure that you eat right, even if they're not eating right.
That's me. Always fixing
I always
things.
feel everybody well and I end up not eating anything for the whole day.
Yeah.
Oh, crazy, right?
Yeah. We look a little bit more on each one. We have just a few minutes left, and I hope that you're taking away something. Maybe you might want to share your takeaway from tonight's program. we're journeying toward doing your genogram. Yeah, but we're not there yet.
So one of the things, Pastor, that
Yeah.
I'm the one who put the question in the chat because on paper, I feel like I look one way, but inside I feel like I am a completely different way.
Yeah.
Now I thought I was part caregiver, part heroine, or part caregiver, parts scapegoat, but there's no way. When you got into the heroine, there's so many traits that the heroine possess that I actually know who in my family I can give that crown to.
Yeah.
I just, for some reason, when I hear the words like caregiver, I'm like, but I have so many aspects of all the other ones too. And I know I feel on the inside sometimes like the other ones, but I can only be one at a time, right?
Yes. And the circumstances in which you find yourself determines which one you will be.
I hate being textbook. I really don't like it, but when you say it like that, I can see it very clearly. So thank you.
Great.
So at different times in a person's life, you could be one of these personalities. Like you could be something at one time and then something else and something else. So, boy, I'm all of those things and more.
Yes. It depends on the role that you played, and the one that's most consistent is the one that you played most consistently in your family. Yeah.
Can I share something personal?
Yes.
So I was thinking about it in the sense of going when my father just passed a couple of weeks ago. There, I feel like almost every one of my brothers and sister, we all played a certain role.
Yes,
because I got this call that I'm doing air quotes, expected, let me turn on my camera, to be there, and that my father felt like he needed me. And of course, I'm going to go. In my mind, I was thinking, I'm only going because I will feel bad since I didn't have a strong relationship with him. In my mind, I'm thinking, I'll feel bad if I don't go. Maybe I'll feel this, that, and the other. And maybe it's the Christian, the graceful, the right thing to do. But of course, there are other siblings that just would not go, even though they had the means, the times, the ability to go. They wear a different hat. So it was almost, it almost is textbook the way you've laid out some of these things. But
yeah.
I like the sound of hero or heroine better than I do caregiver or the star.
Yeah.
Because on the inside, I want to be the star. Yes. I want to be the one that proves away all of the dysfunction in my family with great success.
But I think that may have been the role you played most consistently, because you're very good at it, and so you're very articulate, charismatic, all of those kinds of things. And because you're the youngest child, that would be the role that your mother would dress you up to be the star, put you in front of people, tell them what happened, tell them, you would have been given that role in the family.
Yeah, because I feel sometimes that, but when I see the actions lay out, the person who actually does show up, the person who will actually make sure things like it's very interesting. But she also did that because I'm the cutest.
Oh, that is definitely funny. Yeah. So anyone else? Look at Grace. What's the takeaway for you? We're wrapping up. We're out of time, actually. Michelle, would you pray us out? Would you pray for us? And
I have one quick question, if that's okay.
Yes, Veronica, go ahead.
There was a slide that had it was a description of a family,
Yeah.
but they had no children, but they were called,
A family. Yeah.
but the description had something with children in it, and it threw me off. And I was like, wow, how are they included at all either?
Because they would be like living in their parents' house, or they have relatives that come in to live with them even temporarily. So they don't have children, but they are in the family setting,
Oh, okay, thank you.
live as a family. And so someone in that family would play the role that is necessary to keep the family system in a balanced way, or thinking that they're keeping it in a balanced way. Yeah. Yeah, great. Okay, Michelle, please pray for us.
Father in heaven, we thank you for the day. We thank you for tonight. We thank you for the discussion and the lesson that we learned. We ask that it will help us as we continue on, that you'll be able to learn something and to be able to allow you to lead out in our lives, that we're able to understand, and that you will help us to have a fulfilled life. Some we may be having difficulties with different situations. We ask that it will help us to allow you to take control. Lead Pastor Habit as she bring the message to us, that we may understand, and whatever we learn, help us to be able to gain something and be able to share with others. Thank you for the blessings, and may we have a good night with each person here and each person's family. Going to bless us all, we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. If
Amen.
if you have time, you could look at Google genograms and begin to look at them, because we're going to develop our genogram.
And Pastor, what I'll make sure we have available for next week is that if no one is able to locate a genogram form, I'll have some to be able to email to people during.
Okay, great. Okay. Thank you. Yes. Go ahead, Jeanette.
I just said good night, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Good night.
Good night. Bye.
It was a good evening.
Yes. Yes.